There are moments when the quiet courage of a single act can ripple through the world, when a human hand reaches out, trembling but determined, to save a life that cannot speak for itself. In every corner of the earth, from sunburned savannas to frostbitten cities, these moments happen quietly, unseen, yet they remind us that love has no species, no border, no limit. These are 5 stories of rescue, redemption, and the fierce beauty of compassion. It was dawn in Nairobi, Kenya, when the first story began, not in a clinic or a city street, but deep in the wild plains near Tsavo National Park. The air shimmered with heat even at sunrise, and the cries of a baby elephant echoed faintly through the acacia trees. Ranger Daniel Okoth had been on patrol for 3 days straight, tracking signs of poachers. What he found instead was heartbreak, a calf, barely a year old, standing beside its fallen mother. Her tusks were gone, taken in the night. The calf's trunk brushed her lifeless body again and again, as though trying to wake her. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen this scene too many times, but something about this calf, her small, defiant stance, the flicker of trust in her eyes, made him act faster than he ever had before. He radioed the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, knowing every minute mattered. By the time the rescue team arrived, dehydration had set in. The helicopter thudded overhead as tranquilizer darts were prepared. But before they could use them, Daniel stepped closer and spoke softly in Swahili. "Tulia, mdogo wangu," he whispered. "Be calm, little one." The calf hesitated. Then, miraculously, she took a shaky step toward him. Hours later, she was lifted into a sling and flown to the Nairobi Elephant Nursery, where keepers named her Amani, peace. She refused to eat for 2 days, trembling each time she heard human voices. But Daniel came to visit, sitting beside her pen, talking to her as though she were family. On the 3rd day, Amani accepted her first bottle of milk. By the end of the week, she followed him around the enclosure, trunk curled around his sleeve. Today, years later, Amani lives free again in Tsavo's protected sanctuary, the same land where she was found. Every so often, she returns near the fence line, raising her trunk toward the rangers' camp. Daniel swears she remembers. And maybe she does. Half a world away, in Venice, Italy, a rescue began not in wilderness but in floodwaters. It was November, during one of the worst acqua alta seasons in recent memory. The canals overflowed, and the streets turned into rivers of salt and debris. Among the chaos, an elderly woman named Lucia tried to reach her flooded home in Cannaregio, clutching her cat carrier. But when a wave crashed against her, the carrier slipped, and her orange tabby, Tito, disappeared into the gray water. Lucia screamed until her voice cracked, wading chest-deep through the freezing current. A volunteer group, the Protezione Civile, spotted her from their rescue boat. One of them, a young firefighter named Marco, leapt out without hesitation, plunging into the murky water. He dove once. Nothing. Then again, and there, clinging to a floating plank, eyes wide with terror, was Tito. The cat hissed weakly, his fur plastered flat, but Marco caught him gently, wrapping him in his jacket as he fought his way back to the surface. When he handed the trembling cat to Lucia, she burst into tears. "He's all I have left," she said, voice shaking. Marco only smiled, soaked to the bone. "Then we couldn't let him go, could we?" Later, a photo of the moment, Lucia holding Tito, her wrinkled hands cupped around his small face as he meowed, went viral across Italy. It became a symbol of that flood, and of the small, stubborn kindnesses that survived it. Months later, when the waters receded and the city healed, Lucia sent Marco a note written in delicate cursive, "Grazie per avermi ridato la famiglia." "Thank you for giving me my family back." In Alberta, Canada, winter was at its fiercest when the next rescue unfolded, the kind of cold that bites through gloves and numbs the soul. The snow was waist-deep, and visibility stretched no more than a few meters. Tracy Miller, a wildlife biologist, was driving home after checking snowshoe hare populations when something dark flickered in the whiteness near the road. At first, she thought it was a trick of the wind, until she saw the movement again, a coyote, limping badly, half buried in snow. Most people would have kept driving. Coyotes, after all, are often misunderstood, seen as pests rather than creatures worth saving. But Tracy stopped. The animal's leg was caught in an illegal steel jaw trap, its teeth biting into the flesh. The coyote, gaunt and desperate, snarled weakly as she approached. Tracy crouched several feet away. "Hey," she said softly, her voice shaking in the wind. "I'm not here to hurt you." She spent nearly an hour talking to the animal, moving inch by inch, until the fear in its eyes dulled into exhaustion. Finally, using a heavy stick in her insulated gloves, she pried open the trap and freed its leg. She expected it to bolt, but instead, the coyote simply collapsed in the snow. Tracy wrapped her parka around its body and carried it to her truck. For weeks, she nursed it at the wildlife center, cleaning the wound and feeding it minced rabbit. The coyote, whom she named Echo, slowly gained strength. On the day of his release, the staff opened the gate and watched as Echo paused at the tree line. He turned back once, his gold eyes meeting Tracy's. Then, with a flash of fur and snow, he disappeared into the wild. That night, Tracy wrote in her field journal, "Compassion isn't about taming nature, it's about respecting its pain." Months later, camera traps caught sight of a healthy male coyote traveling with a mate and two pups. On one pup's leg was a faint scar, the same pattern left by the old trap. Echo had survived, and more, he had passed life forward. In Mumbai, India, the rescue began not with a person, but with a sound, a faint whimper beneath the roar of traffic. The monsoon had just ended, and the city's streets still glistened with puddles reflecting the neon of motorbikes and taxis. A young man named Arav, who worked night shifts at a delivery service, was walking home when he heard it, a cry, so small it almost vanished under the honking of cars. He followed it to a storm drain, half covered with rusted iron bars. Peering inside, he saw a shivering puppy, barely a few weeks old, trapped in knee-deep water. He tried to lift the bars, but they wouldn't budge. So he shouted for help. Within minutes, a few others from nearby stalls joined him, a chai vendor, two street kids, and a traffic officer. Together they pried open the grate with a crowbar. Arav climbed down, his shoes filling with mud, and scooped up the trembling pup. Its fur was matted with oil and grime, its heartbeat fluttered like a bird. The puppy didn't make a sound, it just buried its face in his arm. Arav took it home, cleaned it, and fed it with a dropper. He named her Chutki, Tiny One. Over the next months, Chutki followed him everywhere, riding in his delivery backpack, sleeping curled up on his worn jacket. Word spread online after a passerby filmed Arav delivering packages with the little dog poking her head out of the bag. People began donating food, a vet offered free vaccinations, and a small crowdfunding page helped Arav move from his tin-roofed shack into a one-room apartment. But the truest change came quietly. Arav, who had once felt invisible in a city of millions, now had a companion who saw only him. Years later, when he started a nonprofit that helped stray animals find homes, he named it Chutki's Promise. To this day, its slogan hangs on a painted wall in Mumbai's suburbs: "One small rescue can change two lives." The last story came from Australia, in the smoke-choked summer of 2020, the year of the Great Bushfires. Among the volunteer rescuers was a young veterinarian named Claire Nguyen. She had grown up in Melbourne, far from the outback, but when the fires came, she drove 12 hours north to help. The world she entered looked like the end of time. Trees turned to skeletons, skies orange with ash, the cries of displaced animals echoing from the ruins. On her second night there, she found a koala clinging to the charred remains of a eucalyptus tree. Its fur was singed, paws blistered. She moved slowly, wrapping the animal in a damp towel. It didn't resist, it was too weak. At the emergency shelter, she spent hours cleaning burns and applying ointment, whispering softly to keep the animal calm. The team named him Ash. For weeks, she and the other volunteers worked without rest, taking in hundreds of injured creatures, kangaroos, wombats, cockatoos, all bearing the scars of a world on fire. But Ash was different. He refused to eat, even as the others healed. Claire began carrying him around with her, nestled in a cloth sling, feeding him by hand. "You're going to make it," she told him one night as the wind howled outside their tent. "You have to. We need you to remind us what's worth saving." Days turned to weeks. Then one morning, Ash reached for the eucalyptus leaves she held out. His paw trembled, but he ate. That single movement, so small, so fragile, made the volunteers cry. Months later, when Ash was released back into a regenerated forest, Claire watched from the jeep, her face streaked with soot and tears. He climbed the nearest tree, paused, and looked back. Then, slowly, he blinked, a gesture so calm and deliberate it felt almost like gratitude. That night, Claire wrote on the shelter's message board, "Even the smallest survivor can reignite hope. 5 rescues. 5 lives changed forever, though, in truth, the ones most transformed were the humans who refused to walk away." Daniel still patrols the plains of Savo, always keeping one ear tuned for the trumpeting of elephants. Sometimes, when he sees a shadow moving through the dust at dusk, he smiles, certain it's Amani, older, stronger, free. In Venice, Lucia's tiny apartment is lined with photos of Tito. The two of them now volunteer at an animal therapy center, visiting children recovering from trauma. The cat who nearly drowned now curls in the laps of kids learning to smile again. In Alberta, Tracy continues her research, her field notes filled with sketches of coyote tracks. Whenever she finds one with a faint limp, she can't help but wonder if Echo's lineage still runs through the snow. Arav's shelter in Mumbai has rescued over 300 animals in 3 years. Chutki, gray-muzzled now, naps by his feet during every adoption event. Each time a new family takes home a stray, Arav feels the same quiet joy he did the night he first lifted her from that drain. And in Australia, Claire lectures at veterinary schools, teaching future rescuers how to balance medicine with empathy. In her office hangs a framed leaf, brittle, singed at the edges, the first one Ash ever ate. They live continents apart, speak different languages, believe in different gods. Yet each of them carries the same invisible mark, a memory of that moment when compassion overruled fear. When saving another life became the most human act imaginable. What unites them, and all of us who care, is the belief that kindness, however small, is never wasted. A whisper to a frightened elephant. A dive into dark water. A jacket wrapped around a wounded coyote. A boy kneeling in the rain. A towel draped over a trembling koala. These moments, fleeting and fragile, are proof that the world, for all its cruelty, still bends toward mercy. And maybe that's the true power of rescue, not just the saving of one life, but the quiet, miraculous reminder that we can still save each other.